So one of the most important reasons why I signed this reading from Adorno and Horkheimer is they have some claims which they think mass culture, they have claims about what mass culture does to society, what it does to you and I. So what are some of the claims that they have for what mass culture does? One thing is they say because of the culture industry and bureaucratized companies that can get specific focused messages out, they see that it has the ability to shape everything we see, that it has the ability to introduce strong narratives about common sense or about ways to think about the world. Now, this doesn't have to be necessarily duplicitous, like they're trying to send certain overt political messages, but instead they point out that the way it works is by kind of continually repeating through media certain ways to interpret the world. And let me just give you one example. For example, after Hurricane Katrina, one of the biggest storylines about media covering Katrina was about looting. And there were all sorts of claims about looting and pictures of supposed looters. The best investigative reporting and social science research after Katrina showed a couple things. First, there were hardly any incidences of looting. Where looting occurred was usually due to lack of any access to supplies of food and things such as that, as well as no communication from outside agencies. And that most importantly, or least covered, but most importantly, there was more violence by actual local police forces against Katrina residents than there was any vice versa. And even last fall, some of these trials were still going through of Katrina police that had shot and killed people. But the media narratives that we get are the truths that are put out are quick images, quick stories that then get kind of cued again and circled around anytime a big story like that happens again. You can think of another example of how narratives get told. If you watch any financial reporting nowadays, even segments of main news shows or anything on CNBC, the stock market, for example, gets talked about in emotional terms. Stories are told about stocks weren't feeling good today, or stocks climbed to the heights today and wanting to escape to the freedom of more capital availability. Those are narratives, ways of talking about the world that when repeated over again and focused through the culture industry, the media outlets of the culture industry, can really have effect on the way that we think about the nature of the world. There is, I'll skip down here to this one, there's a uniformity that Horkheimer and Adorno pointed out to what comes out, that every movie has been made before and will be made again because it's what's produced and it's a least common denominator that people seem to like. So for example, is it no surprise that vampires have been all over the freaking place? One production company has a success with the vampire genre, and before you know it, everywhere, television, radio, internet, movies, it's vampires, vampires, vampires. Well, according to their argument, this uniformity is really a pretty safe economic strategy. You know vampires are going to sell, so if you're a major media company, a part of the culture industry, why wouldn't you try and sell vampires? It's what people will watch, what they will consume, and importantly, what you can sell advertisers around, and people will spend money. So they're pointing out kind of a profit motive behind all of this. And then this is a big concern of theirs, especially, and keep this in mind, especially the political context they're coming out of having survived and seen the horrors of World War II, which is, they said, a passivity develops. That what the culture industry is doing, it's not concerned about making democracy better. It's not concerned about probing the deepest questions of humanity. It's not concerned about your local community and what's going on there. What it's concerned about is actually reproducing itself and making money. It deadens creativity in this kind of all-out pursuit to centralize the creations of culture and to make money. Now, I'll insert a quick link right here. which shows, which has a link to a classic clip from The Devil Wears Prada. If you've seen this clip at all, you'll no doubt remember the scene. If you hadn't seen it, it's a great example of how the culture industry works. So we have Meryl Streep in this occasion saying, basically calling out the uppity little intern to say the decisions that we make in, and keep this in mind, this centralized, bureaucratic, focused clothing design company, or I think it was for a magazine, what we make matters. The decisions that we do here matters. And it matters, you can think of it, it matters because if we're thinking through Adorno and Horkheimer, they're at the top of a major part of the culture industry whose decisions that they make there can have ripple out effects to all sorts of decisions that are made. And as Meryl Streep points out, you eventually get to the dowdy blue colored sweater that the uppity intern is wearing. And as she even points out, Meryl Streep points out, that feeling that this intern had of making a creative, free decision about picking this sweater actually was constrained because of a whole bunch of decisions made way up in this bureaucracy of decision making that most of us are totally unaware of. And I think that clip really kind of gets a wonderful sense of the Adorno and Horkheimer argument of the lack of choice that in their description of mass culture and the culture industry that we end up with. So let me say a few kind of concluding words here. First off, I've introduced this concept of hegemony as we got from Antonio Gramsci. It shows how power can continue in a given society, that through the process of hegemony, the notions of ideology become a part of who we are. The structure of the world becomes a part of our common sense interpretation of the world, especially through the work of organic intellectuals. And so he's pointed out just kind of how nefarious culture as ideology could be. But he missed the role of the mass, of the culture industry and of mass culture, which I've been talking about. This mass culture approach, of course, shows how important bureaucratic agencies are for commercializing culture, for centralizing it, and in their pessimistic vision for making what comes out of this culture industry kind of incredibly uniform and boring and least common denominator. There are some problems with with Adorno and Horkheimer's argument. They don't see how there can be kind of small markets that produce culture, maybe like a local independent or college radio station or the independent film house that's up there on Speedway. They don't see how you can make money out of those things without necessarily always having to package boring, yucky cultural products. They're basically defining the sphere of mass culture as media companies, but they're missing the possibility that there's also a lot of other venues where culture is produced that might be not so directly tied to the profit motive. Now I want to leave you with a thought here, which is, can there be an alternative? This is Frank's article, and Frank's article is particularly challenging because he shows, in the spirit of Adorno and Horkheimer, that even the concept of alternative has been desecrated. So we are actually now, the culture industry is so adept at what it does, its packaging, that it's even packaged the idea of alternative. So that's what's sold as alternative, according to Frank, is just one more for-profit culture creation. So it leaves you with this even deeper thought. If even alternative can be corrupted, then where can we find an alternative to the alternative? So our discussion this week is to help you become a little bit better at using some of these tools in your own thought about the culture we see around us all the time from the culture industry. That's it for now. Next week we'll move on to a related but different topic. And as always, if you have questions, please let me know. Have a good week. Bye.